As films and other kinds of moving images move between different viewing spaces and technologies, aspect ratio has become important in new ways, both for filmmakers and for film viewers. So what is an aspect ratio? Aspect ratio refers to the relationship between the width of the image and its height. People talk about a film's aspect ratio. They're talking really about the shape of the image. Now, there are various aspect ratios found in cinema, from very wide to narrow. At different points in cinema's history, different aspect ratios have been more commonly used. Up until the 1950s, the dominant aspect ratio in filmmaking is what is called the Academy ratio. The Academy ratio is an aspect ratio of 1:37 to 1. It is a lot narrower than the widescreen films that we are used to today. In the first few decades of cinema, the aspect ratio was usually 1:33 to 1. But when sound was introduced and optical sound was added to the film strip, the ratio was changed to 1:37 to 1. It is called the Academy ratio because the US Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences declared this to be the standard ratio in the 1930s. In his book Letterboxd, the American film and media theorist Harper Cossa writes that if cinema's history can be compared to, say, painting, then prior to 1953's advent of widescreen filmmaking, cinema existed as a portrait-only operation, with a premium placed on vertical compositions. Cossa makes the interesting suggestion that, when he writes, before 1953, cinema's shape is that of portraiture, and after 1953, cinema's shape is landscape. Of course, when Harper Cossa writes that cinema's shape used to be more vertically oriented, he is not saying that horizontally oriented shots and horizontally oriented mise-en-scène weren't possible, but rather that after the widescreen revolution of the 1950s and after the advent of television, lateral orientation of the image became much more dominant in cinema. We can also think about this in relationship to what has happened with television, which has also moved from an almost square image to a wider screen. When films move from one viewing or screening device to another, what happens to the aspect ratio or the shape of the image? Does it stay the same, or is it altered to fit the different viewing device or space? Alterations can include things like stretching or cropping the image, but we also have things like letterboxing, pillarboxing and cropping. Often the aspect ratio is altered to accommodate the device or screening context. Sometimes altering a film's aspect ratio can have significant effects on the film. This is something that a filmmaker might try to accommodate in advance, or alternatively, something they might try to avoid. Throughout cinema's history, there have been filmmakers who have explored the possibilities of different aspect ratios. Next time you watch a film, think about whether its aspect ratio has been altered for the screening context, or if you yourself have altered it so that it fits the screening device you are using.